Okay, thanks, sir.
Morning everyone for the meeting this morning at FAPM. I know some of you have to leave part of the way through the meeting. I have been informed you've got other meetings to attend. That's quite okay. All right. If we look on the agenda now, the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Have we got any apologies? If they are, they're not here. But anyway, if there are, we can note it and then we know who in attendance and who not. If we go on to item 2, is declarations of interest. I won't read all of that. Anybody got any declarations regarding anything in the report? The only one I've got is a new station as usual. That's still ongoing.
In that case, Chair, Penal Station is in my area, and there's stuff happening on some of the other stations which your family members working on.
Right.
But that's like I've declared this previously.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just prudent to do it. Anybody else before we move to the next item? No. Item 3 then, the chairperson announcements. I've got no announcements, so I've been aware of anything. So we'll move on to item 4 then. To receive the minutes of the FAPM committee held on the 25th of July 2022, and it's on page 5. I'll go through them page by page. Page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, and page 9. That's why we can't hear anything. Sorry, the mic was on mute if anybody was trying to read anything. No?
No, I can hear you now, Chair. I'm happy to move the minutes if you come to that.
Great, thanks very much.
Okay.
If we move on to reports for decision, then item 5. This is the medium-term financial strategy, reserve strategy, and the revenue budget update report. That is on page 11. And I think Chris is the lead on that one.
Very conscious members, for those of you who attended the Fire Authority meeting at the end of September, you will have already seen this report. So I'm very conscious of the need to sort of balance the need to go through the report in detail and also present in the same script that the Fire Authority has already received. It was down to a quirk of the way the meeting timetable came this year that we actually took the report to Fire Authority before the FAPM committee. The report itself sets out the medium-term financial strategy and also looks at the immediate preparation for next year's budget as well. So I'll just touch on some of the key points in the report, really. Obviously, the economic climate and the economic context, inflation and pay pressures within the economy at the moment are a significant factor in drawing up this report. And there's a great deal of uncertainty in terms of the assumptions that we're making around some of these issues. And I'm sure you'll all be aware of that from watching the news from day to day as things move. Over the last 10 years or so, most of the public sector has been under austerity, the austerity agenda. And only in the last couple of years, really, have we seen budgets start to increase. And that was brought to a head, really, with a 10% increase for resources to local authorities in the current financial year. But We don't anticipate, of course, that those sorts of size of increases will continue. And indeed, there's some indication that some commentators are saying we might be returning to another phase of austerity in itself. So again, it's against that background and not really having certainty about what government settlements and government budgets are going to look like, but also not council budgets either, in terms of what resources they might have available to fund the fire authority over the coming years. In terms of the report itself, the appendix to the report gives you a lot of detail around the assumptions we've made with regards to our medium-term financial strategy. I don't intend to go through the detail of that today, but what I am going to do is just talk you through some of the immediate base budget considerations for next year, which is probably the most significant challenge involved. I've mentioned pay already. It's sort of exercising our minds at the moment. The pay provisions we made in last financial year, we slightly over-assumed on pay, and that resulted in an underspend for last financial year. The consequence of that is we've probably slightly under-assumed for pay in the current year, and obviously with the rate of inflation now going where it has done over the last couple of months, it's likely we will be significantly under budgeted for pay for the current year. We actually assumed an average of around 1.5% for pay awards for the current year, and obviously we are looking now at much higher pay awards than that. There's currently a green book offer on the table around pay, which is something around 7% average. I say average because it's a flat rate settlement rather than a percentage settlement. And we're currently in a position where the grey book pay offer on the table is only 2%. And we're in a situation where grey book staff are actually with their union talking about balloting for industrial action to see whether or not they will take any sort of action, strike or otherwise, to look for a bigger increase. So we have a degree of uncertainty around that. The key point is there, I think, if we have a 7% pay offer on the books, green book, it's likely that grey book staff, the uniform staff, will be looking for similar order of increases against that background. So we'll have to wait and see what that comes out with. The other problem, of course, that's for the current year. The other problem we have then is trying to second guess what the pay awards for next year is likely to be. We have an estimate at the moment within these figures of around 3%, but it's incredibly difficult to know what the rate of inflation is going to do over the next couple of years, and therefore what pay expectations are going to be. With those assumptions in the plan, we could see an increase in our pay budget of around £5 million next year. So that's quite a significant increase, obviously. And beyond that, then, we've got additional inflationary pressures on the budget. We all know, I'm sure, about the inflation on energy costs, but also building maintenance as well. Fuel costs are going up across the piece as well. So there are a number of sort of key areas where our budget is under significant inflationary pressure. And the other point about that as well is that our suppliers are suffering the same inflationary pressures, and lots of our contracts are actually built on an assumption that our contracts will increase by the rate of inflation, and of course suppliers will pass those inflationary increases back through those contracts to the fire authority. So there's going to be a lot of pressure for other people's inflation as well, not just our own direct inflation. There are also some pressures within the budget itself around things like our premises maintenance, where we're always looking to try and maintain our premises at an appropriate level of readiness and preparedness for the services we need to provide from them, and also our communications budget as well, which is increasing next year, particularly because we're aware that the Emergency Services Network project, which is the renewal of the infrastructure around our communications, the costs are going up on that, and the replacement project is not yet delivered. So we're likely to see continued increased costs as that project comes to fruition. I've already mentioned sort of inflation coming through from contractors. There are a couple of key areas for that, really. The first is in our ICT budget. Clearly, we have lots of support license agreements with our suppliers of IT. They see increased costs, they pass those increased costs through. And also we're currently out to tender as well for our authority's insurance cover. And that tender is ongoing at the moment, and we're anticipating that will increase. Our brokers are advising us there is likely to be inflationary elements on that budget as well. I've mentioned fuel already. Transport costs are going up generally, including vehicle parts costs as well. So that's likely to come through next year. And also the delivery of our capital programme results in higher capital financing costs as well. So we're anticipating that budget will go up. In terms of the budget projections themselves, there is actually an update to this report. The figures that went to Fire Authority at the end of September had actually had an update done to them. So this budget projection report actually shows an increase of 9.1% in terms of budget. The figure reported to Fire Authority, which is the updated figure, is actually 10.6%. So it's actually gone up since we actually drafted this original MTFS for FAPM. So that's really the challenge for next financial year. There's no decision required today from the meeting to actually agree a budget. So in that sense, this is for information at this moment in time. And there are some pieces of work which were intended to do over the next couple of months before you have to set a consultation budget in December. There's a couple of key pieces of work around that. One is obviously to review all our budget assumptions in the light of things that are moving. To give an example of that, members will probably remember that in the mini budget, the Chancellor cancelled the upcoming national insurance rise. So therefore, national insurance costs will fall back, and that will again reduce our pay inflation. So we're already seeing sort of figures going the other way as a result of announcements in the economy by government. But also as well, obviously, as we come to our fruition with our pay negotiations, some of these figures will start to crystallise in terms of knowing what they actually are rather than assumptions at the moment. So we're intended to sort of review all of those assumptions in terms of our budget over the next couple of months. The other thing we'll be doing as well is actually going back via the executive leadership team of the authority to actually review all of the budget submissions that have come forward. So all of the bids for resources which underpin the budget, we'll be reviewing those to make sure they're absolutely necessary and critical to the service. And we're also looking at alternative ways of possibly funding those, so ways of smoothing out those demands over a period of time to actually decrease the pressure on next year's budget. So that's another piece of work we'll be doing over the period to ensure that we can get this figure to the right figure and as low a reasonable figure as we can. Obviously, what we won't be doing is under budgeting if we can avoid that at all costs. So that's the sort of headlines of the report. As I say, there's no immediate decision making here on budget. We will be visiting, if we can, all of the unitary authorities who represent our funding partners over the next couple of months. There are already some meetings in the diary. I think the first one is actually next week from memory. So we'll be looking to actually attend our local authority partners meetings, talk them through the challenges we've got, as well as what the Fire Authority does in terms of its operations and services, so that authorities are well aware of the situation. I have already shared some of these figures with the 10 constituent authorities, so that they will be aware of the challenges to come. And I also believe emailed following the Fire Authority meeting all members with the size of the challenge in terms of the headline increase, so you had a feel for what that meant in terms of your own authority. Taking on board, as I said, the health warning, these figures are not final yet, and you're certainly not being asked to approve them here today. So I'm going to stop there, Chair. That's the sort of guts of the report, really, in terms of the challenge that's coming. And I'll take any questions if members have them.
Thanks for that, Chris, for the comprehensive report. Jen, did you want a question?
Just a comment on the resources that you just said, Chris, and then I'll go back to my question. Do we apply for grants in any shape or form? Forgive my ignorance, I can't remember from before.
Yeah, we do.
We do, Chair. There's a number of sources of grant. Welsh Government actually grant aid the authority for some direct costs around national resilience and some of our community safety work, and also fund a substantial part of the pensions load on the authority as well. So there are significant monies that come through Welsh Government in that regard. But one thing I did point out in the Fire Authority, I'll say it again now, is that a lot of those grants are cash flat. They don't increase with inflation. Oh, right. And to that extent, they represent a cut. Yes. If our pay costs are going up 10% and effectively they're funding at the same level, it's a 10% less resource. So that's an important point. There is a piece of work going on with the WLGA, who are compiling for both the fire authorities and all the local authorities in Wales a pressures document, which is going back to the finance subgroup of Welsh Government to actually share with them the demands and pressures that exist within the public sector more generally across Wales. And some of these figures and some of this information that we're discussing today, and indeed that grants issue, is on that discussion paper.
Okay.
So I've been feeding into that process so that Welsh Government are well aware of the challenges which are being faced across the whole of the public sector, certainly for next year, but the next couple of years as well. So that piece of work is going on as well to feed that back.
My question is, you said about the increase in the 5 million. How will that affect stations that are needing upgrading and staffing going forward for the future? Because we all know from school budgets and other places, you know, the money goes up and the staffing goes down.
Okay, so
So how are we going to?
So the presentation of this medium-term financial strategy at the moment is based on a full staffing complement. So it assumes that we will maintain staffing at the same level.
Yeah.
So there's no provision in this for staff cuts.
Right.
Okay, just to put that on the table.
Okay. I keep my eye on it then. Thank you.
One question, Chris. With the evaluations and the increased budget projections, you said next year's gone up from 9.1 to 10.6. Does that 1.5% knock on to the following years? So
Yes,
does the
it-
two become 3.5?
No, sorry, the percentage increases. So the figures that were reported to Fire Authority are the updated figures. So the 9.1 is actually 10.6. The other figures are broadly similar because they're just percentages from there on.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I got one. Every 1% increase, Chris, how much are they evaluate on our budget impact?
In terms of pay budget, it's about £600,000 at the moment, I believe, in terms of pay. So you're talking about 1% pay is £600,000. The budget at the moment is set around 80 million. So every 1% increase on the budget is about £800,000 in total.
Oh, yeah. So for 7%, that's a fair bit then.
Yeah, so the 10.6, I think the figures I shared with members were off the Fire Authority report. So the 10.6 is over £8 million worth of increases shared amongst the 10 authorities. It's probably worthwhile reminding members as well that I did share those figures. There was a health warning on them, but the bigger health warning as well was the fact that they're based on population shares, and we know the population shares change every year, and it's quite a significant change at the moment. There's a piece of work going on with the Statistics Office, because of course the last census is just starting to feed through. There was a census in 2021, so that data is now starting to feed through the process. So it's introducing a significant amount of churn in those numbers. So we could see quite significant changes of population between authorities. It's likely, I say likely at the moment until we see the numbers, but the tendency is for urban authorities to still increase and rural authorities to still be reducing. So it's a general sort of trend that we're seeing. So it wouldn't surprise me. Newport in particular was on quite a significant growth curve, so that one could be higher and therefore taking a bigger share of the budget. Whereas the authorities at the heads of the valleys around Blaenau, places like that in Monmouthshire, were tending not to increase so much. So that might be a factor which feeds through as well as we look at the figures coming through. As soon as I've got that data, I'll share it with you, obviously.
Can I pick that up a minute? Because there's a lot of building going on around Blaenau. I've never seen so many houses going up in all my life. You know, that will have a knock-on effect for us, won't it?
Yes, they don't. I mean, the house building obviously impacts the authorities because they get additional council tax from
Yes,
it
that's where I'm coming from.
when the properties come on
Yes.
board, and that funds the local services themselves.
Yeah.
The population estimates are done by the Statistics Office to actually look at the census data that came out, but also trends in data as well. House building will play a part in that, but there's lots of other things that go into that as well, including the transient sort of tourist population feeds into it, all sorts of other factors as well. So what they do is they not only produce information immediately on the census, but they also track that data over time. So they'll be doing projections and it's those projections that feed into the population changes as well.
Yeah.
So yes, it will pick up things like that.
Yeah.
Taking on board that Blind Gwent is a relatively small
Yes,
council as
it
far as the
is.
fire authority is
Yes.
concerned, and therefore any changes are kind of smaller changes.
God helps. God helps. Every little bit helps.
The other question I got, Chris, on 2.47 on page 15. We look at the target in reductions for the vehicles. What impacts the electrical vehicles having on the fuel costs and the running of the diesels and everything else?
I mean, clearly the fuel costs have come down initially because of the bringing on of the electric fleet, and it's still cheaper
Yeah.
fuel-wise to run an electric vehicle than it is to run a petrol or diesel vehicle. I mean, clearly energy costs are going up, and therefore we are seeing increases on the electricity, but it's still nowhere near the cost of running petrol or diesel, so it's still the right thing financially to do from an operational running cost, but it's also, of course, in line with our carbon commitment as well. So it's the right thing to do, even if the costs were the same.
Yeah.
So that's the tactic at the moment, and we're still intending to progress with that policy of renewal whenever we can.
Excellent. Yeah. Go on.
Just one question on where you said you're not looking at staffing cuts at the moment, and I know the staffing is further in the report, but we're going to continue to recruit against the shortfalls that we were going to, or are you going to hold off?
At the moment, the intention from an operational point of view is to maintain the cohort as planned. So we currently got training courses in the pipeline and planned, so they will continue to maintain the whole-time establishment at the level that it should be. And of course, with the on-call, we know there's always been recruitment challenges around on-call, but the project to continue on-call recruitment activity still continues. You know, there's no intention to stop that. I think the one thing we did say, we took this report through the scrutiny group, and one of the discussions there was the extent to which we recognise the challenges of recruitment and accept the fact that we will never hit the full complement of staff, and whether you make an assumption that there will therefore be a bit of a saving on those budgets. So that's something we will be looking at as part of our budgeting strategy. But what we're not saying is halt recruitment or anything like that.
Thank you.
Chris, we got
many come and go, don't we? That's a problem.
we got a question online from Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's on the issue of the Office of National Statistics and the differential population changes across the local authorities. Do we have a date when this would be finalised, and what mechanism is there for notifying us of the final outcome? Thanks.
Okay, Martin, I'm in the hands of Welsh Government on that. Obviously, they deal directly with the Office of National Statistics on the data. As soon as they confirm what data will be used in the local government settlement, then usually I can get hold of that at that point. It's usually in the next month or so. As soon as I've got it, then I can sort of share that either directly with members if that's what members want, or obviously at the next appropriate meeting. Because we have got further meetings on the budget through the remaining couple of months. So it's that data that will be used, and it's important. And I think I've said this on quite a few budget meetings now. It's the same population data that's fed into the local government settlement. So if you have increased population in your council area, you will get a better financial settlement from Welsh Government, and of course that will provide you with additional resources to pay the additional fire levy. So it sort of flows through as a golden chain, if you like, within a golden thread within the process of financing local authorities and fire authorities. So it's important to recognise that. But I will share it when I can, Martin.
Yeah, thanks a lot for clarifying that one.
Are you okay with that, Martin?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Any other questions we got for Chris?
Chair, just in terms of procedural practice for the budget setting now, just to sort of reassure members that the quirk in the calendar that happened this year with FAPM coming after Fire Authority, that'll be corrected next year, so it won't happen again next year. That was just a one-off quirk. In terms of the process, this is already, the report, as Chris mentioned, has been through the scrutiny group, and there'll be another scrutiny group in November before it comes back to this committee early December, and then this committee will make recommendations on the budget setting process then, which go to the fire authority in the middle of December. So it falls back in line in terms of process.
Yeah, it's just that the movement of the meetings have altered because of circumstances. Right? So I need definitely make sure there's no more questions before we move on. No. Right. If we look at the recommendations, that members note the risks and uncertainties within the projections and approve the strategy as a basis for financial planning over the strategy period. Is everyone happy with that?
Yes.
That's great. Thank you. Right. We now move on to item 6 then, which is a revenue monitoring report 2022 to 23. That's on page 39. And I think we got Lisa for that one.
Morning, thank you, Chair.
Morning.
Okay, so this is the first revenue monitoring report to members this year since budget setting. So we'll pick up all the changes and differences since we set the budget. I think it was the 14th of February. So this report gives you a number of appendices to support the narrative. There's Appendix 1, which gives you all the budget information. It looks at the actual spend to date, a variance analysis, forecast, and some grant information there. Appendix 2 provides the forecasts at each point in the year, so you can track through what we've presented before, so you don't have to hold on to your papers. It's there for you, readily available. And then and with a highline description of what the changes are. And then appendices 3 and 4 detail the grant funding initiatives. There's financial tables there that'll tell you what the overall impact is of each initiative. And there's a narrative to support that as well. For some grants, we claim more retrospectively, so we have to spend first before we claim them. Most of the time, spend matches grant award, but as Chris said, they are more cash flat. And things like home fire safety equipment that we get funded for, we've historically always outspent that grant because it is necessary for reducing risk in the community. So this report provides a position of an overspend overall on the revenue budget of 935,000. The overall, this is broken down to 2 areas. The salaries are 985,000 spend overspent, and there's a £50,000 underspend on non-salary areas. And just feeding on from what Chris said, the budget was set with an average of 1.5% salary awards, and given the information that we've got at the moment, we've assumed the most likely scenario is 5% across the board. Of course, that's subject to change. We're not there yet, but the current assumption built into these forecasts is the award's going to be 5% corporate and uniform staff. So in terms of money and the financial impact, there's about 2.2 million of overspend in this budget. Now that's the salaries. That's offset to a degree by some underspending on some staff categories, on-call staff being one of them. And underneath here, you can see the establishment figure supports that. You've got a budgeted set of figures and you've got the strength there. So in particular, RDS, we budget for 426, we've got 318, that's a big difference. But the gap there, the underspend that's driving that gap, we are using it to try and sort of pay for the inflation. If that pay settlement is more, that underspend will get bigger. Yeah. Following the establishment figures that are only taken at a point in time, we've got some data on starters and leavers. And also falling under the employee categories are things like pensions, ill health pensions. The budget was put together on the number of people we were currently committed for. Additional have come in since then, so there's a £51,000 overspend. And travel and subsistence has increased as well as a result of the removal of COVID restrictions. So we'll be watching that closely. mainly because we don't want to undo any of the good habits that we built up over COVID with virtual working.
Yeah.
So that's salary and employee costs. Moving on to premises costs, there's a £15,000 overspend there. This links majorly to the fire link costs that we pay to Welsh Government. As Chris said, they cash flat. That's just come into just under £100,000 overspend there. We've got at the moment a small underspend, so 72,000 in national non-domestic rates, which will partially offset that. Training costs are 20,000 over. That will be met from ring fence reserve in the balance sheet, so it won't have an impact on the final position. It related health and safety training that we couldn't get in at the end of last year, so we set that aside. It's been planned for. And then moving on to supplies and services. Now this area, there's about 25 different budgets under this heading. There's lots of ups and downs. But the main drivers of the overspend there, 105,000, is operational equipment, ICT, and of course corporate wear, which is coming in by the end of this year, hopefully. Contracted services is £88,000 overspent, and the main driver of this again is the Securitas contract. So this is the contract that we pay a retainer for operational incident command in the event of an industrial strike. Yeah, so that contract was up this year. We went back out to contract. It increased by £80,000, that contract. Two things: the retender exercise increased those costs, and also the number of incident commanders we've requested has increased from 10 to 16. And I dare say we would need that, all the information we've got at the moment. That leads us on to capital costs, and this links directly with the capital monitoring report, which I've yet to deliver. So there's an £124,000 underspend there, and this relates to less spending in capital than we budgeted for. And also an increase in grants. So we've been lucky enough to secure a number of capital grants this year. And what that does is it reduces our borrowing requirement. So if you're spending less and we've got more grants to finance the spend, we've got less borrowing requirement, which means that we've got less to pay out in statutory charges, the MRP charge, or the minimal revenue provision charge. All right. And lastly, coming on to income of 177,000 additional. Lots of this is down to the interest rate increasing. We currently at bank rate is 2.25% set to increase. So we've been fortunate enough to, because we've got good cash surpluses in the bank, instead of borrowing, we're trying to use those surpluses to our advantage for capital. And we've got 109,000 of additional income coming in there potentially this year. So if rates drop again, that figure will go down. But at the moment, that is the projection. And there's some income there from Mid and West. So what does this mean? This sort of presents £935,000 underspend. Members will be aware that we'll be funding that underspend from our reserve position, as Chris just discussed, with the medium-term financial plan. Appendix 2 presents that picture, so you'll see the reserves have reduced as a result of that financing. The overall net expenditure for the year is 82.4 million, which includes the grant-funded initiatives. So at this moment in time, grant-funded initiatives sit around 2.2% for our revenue activities. Local authority funding for the year in grants equate to 79.3 million and 2.2 million respectively, resulting in the 935 overspend. So there's a number of variables that can alter that position, and we'll come back to members throughout the year to update you accordingly. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions of anybody?
No. Very concisely.
I think overall, there's financial pressures throughout everything we're doing, whether it be services, goods, because the costs have increased so dramatically.
Yeah.
I think every budget is under tremendous pressure, isn't it, really? So. I think we all realise that anyway in some shape or form, but I mean, we have to work with what we got and try and do the best we can with what we got. Any other questions that anybody would like to ask? Lisa is very knowledgeable about this, right?
Yeah. I got questions on Appendix 3,
Okay.
Yeah,
if you
carry
don't
on.
mind. The 1.1.3, the youth, the Phoenix and crime consequence projects. On page
I got it,
49.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That covers obviously all the authorities. This project.
The work we do with our authorities,
Yeah.
yeah.
How does that work out for these young people, you know, to come in and to be trained and what have you, and whatever we're doing, going into the authorities with this? We've all got a lot of young people who are in these units.
I can ask Area Manager Gary Davis to
Yes,
probably
please.
give
I'd like some more
more
So you
information.
sweat a bit.
Do you want to just repeat the question, please?
It's just on the youth about the, you know, what are we doing all together? Because it says an interactive course to learn about the FRS,
Phoenix and crimes and
the
consequences.
crimes and Phoenix projects.
Yeah, so those courses are back up and running now. They look at the different tiers of different tiers in life where they are with crime and consequences, that type of thing. So even though we had quite a long break during COVID, and so most of those courses are running around being a firefighter for a day, or the Phoenix course is still a week's course now.
Yeah.
So those numbers, we're still pushing on that, and that is supported then by the Fire Authority and Welsh Government then for the funding for them.
I think it's an excellent thing to do. And
Yeah.
it has it restarted?
Yes, yeah.
It has.
So they're fully back and running, yeah. Both types of courses. So the crimes and consequences is like
Yeah.
a sharp one hit on individuals, and then the Phoenix program is a week's base. And well, you know, I presented in the past to the Fire Authority the outcome of it, and reoffending rates and everything. It's still a good process, and even more now we're using the fire service label, so they come in, you know, bit of discipline, got to be turned up on time. You know, they become a firefighter for a week.
I think it's an excellent project, supported wholeheartedly, but I would make some more inquiries back at my home authority.
Yeah, because previously we only ran them out of like Malpas and Bridgend, but we run them in all areas now.
Okay.
So we've made it quite mobile. So they've got their own fire engines and everything. Just take it whatever. Even take it into Park Prison as well.
Yes, that was done some years ago, wasn't it? I remember that one.
So we're back in there now.
Good.
And you know, those are just due to be released or things like that. And in particular, if they've got a link with like fire crime, arson, that type of thing, we'll go in and talk to them. Or road traffic collisions, if the reason for them being in prison is that. So really good schemes. Yeah.
So is it tied in with the antisocial behaviour part of it?
Yeah,
that's the main part.
Yeah.
All linked in with the figures.
Yeah.
If you know, if they're in trouble with the police, they sadly these are the children we want. We don't want the really good children, because but you know, it's giving kids a chance. And
Yes, I quite agree.
Because at the moment there seems to be a dramatic rise in antisocial behaviour within particularly wards, probably all our wards, but you know, it's how we deal with it, and how we you know, support or tackle them, or
yeah, and you know, all the agencies dealing with these are fully aware of our courses, and we've got really good partnerships for it.
Yeah, when I read it, I thought, oh,
yeah,
I'll ask them. Now I can go back and ask some more questions.
It's probably easier, Councillor Moore, if we give you details of the lead officers in those areas, and you get the information from within the service.
Yes, please. I'd like that. Thank you.
That invite is always there as well if you want to witness any of the courses, because
Yes.
you've all done it in the past, but it'd be great if you come along and see what's going on as well.
I attended one in Abertillery last week. Found it very interesting.
yeah.
But that was a different course, that one.
Going on to the other side of the young people, and I assume that the COVID stopped the train, you know, you have the youngsters are interested in the training and do it for a couple of years, don't they?
Yeah.
Did that stop while the COVID was
The
on?
fire cadets?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it restarted?
Yes, it's back up again. With
I just
13
wonder
branches.
how, well, it's difficult to say now, it stopped and started, but what sort of proportion do you get of those that actually do carry on and become firefighters?
There's quite a few.
Yeah.
There's a large proportion coming as either on call or full time. So you know, it is like an apprentice scheme running from when they're 13, 14 years
Yeah,
of age.
like a prep school.
Yeah, it's been really good.
I imagine it has stopped during COVID now and, you know.
Yeah, so you know, there's 13 branches now.
Yes, I know, there used to be quite a few in Abergavenny that are doing it.
Yeah, that's still running.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
It's an excellent scheme.
It is.
It is,
It is an excellent scheme.
Yeah. Good. Oh, go on, jump on.
Sorry, I got two questions, Gav. On the HFS stock, I know it says further on we got an £87,000 spend. You know, we used to give out deep fat fryers.
Yeah, I know, remember
It's for
that.
cutting down, because the amount of accidental domestic fires tends to be in the kitchen.
Chip and,
People are looking at all sorts of poverty. Yeah, it's data poverty, fuel poverty. I didn't know where it is operational. We work in partnership for doing CFS stock. If you were doing something like the air fryers, which is healthier, it's working in partnership with the health boards. They might be able to pay into it. It uses a lot more fuel than the hot plate or the oven, so you might get government grant funding. I didn't know if it's worth looking at something like that, because I know they're more expensive to give out. It's keeping people safer, it's saving them money, and it's making them healthier. So it's a knock on for three things.
Totally agree, Councillor. You know, the reason we went from chip pans was because of that reason for the healthy living styles. But what we replaced that, we put heat detectors in the kitchen, so, rather than smoke detectors, because the nuisance alarm with smoke causes, so you know, early warning of fire. And then, you know, it seems to have taken off again, the air fryers. Everyone's talking about them again, so it's something we really, you know, need to speak to Welsh Government about and link in.
And, you know, even if it was meeting people that wanted one halfway, if they can't afford to buy the whole thing, they, again, it's cutting, we're keeping them safer, we're keeping them healthier, and it's saving them money. And the only other question I had on revenue, on 1.115, I think it's on page 51, we're doing partnership stuff with Wales and West Utilities. I don't know if you're aware, they send some of their representatives down to Devon Fire Service to do blue light training. Now, if that's something, we've got blue lights trainers for EFAD, and that, it could be a potential revenue stream for us. It's a partner that we're already working with, and for them to come onto our courses, it might not be a significant outlay for potential income.
Right. You picked up on a question that we got, which is excellent.
Yes, makes sense.
You know, perhaps we can utilise some of their skills for doing signs, because in a fire, if somebody's deaf, they're not going to hear what you'd be pretending to get out. You know what I mean? Or what instructions you're going to give them. If you learn sign, at least you've got some basic sign doing, tell them what's going on.
In our home safety practitioners, the specialists, there are people that can do sign language.
Yeah, yeah.
So, we've
And
got
they
that
do the
facility.
deaf alarms.
And I think, you know, thanks to our Wales and West, because they're a really strong partner. They provide all our carbon monoxide detectors we put in for free.
Yeah, no.
So, you know, if there's a knock on, we can build that partnership, definitely look at it.
And we also wouldn't rule out the aging, because a lot of the elderly, particularly in the deaf side, I mean, that would be a good collaboration probably to integrate with that. I'm sorry, go on.
Yeah, all I was going to say with the Wales and West Utilities blue light training, that was pre-COVID. Whether or not they picked it back up post-COVID, it was just a thought, Gary. It's a potential income stream for us. It's something that we're already doing.
Yeah,
I know we've delivered the Domino program to them, which is the Domino program is the RTC reduction, so safer driving for people. These people are out on the roads all day, every day, and so you know you can get them to drive safely, and So we've done that, but specific driving courses, I don't think we've looked at that. So I'll definitely raise our training. Yeah.
I think a lot of these collaborations are quite important. You know, that some of their expertise is something we probably haven't got, we could use.
Yeah.
That's right, share it, it's much better.
Yeah. So, any other questions regarding? You're doing very well. Nobody else? We'll get back to Lisa then. The recommendations that the Finance Audit and Performance Management Committee note and agree the report content. Is everyone
Agreed.
happy with that? Agreed?
Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
Excellent. Anybody online? Yeah, okay.
That's fine. Yeah.
Right, if we move on to item 7 then, that's the capital monitoring report. I think that's yours as well, Lisa.
Yeah, so this is, like the revenue, is the first capital monitoring report for this financial year to members since budget setting. So this report will update you on the major changes affecting the budget since that time. It presents Appendix 1, which gives you a detail of all the different schemes that we're currently investing in our capital budget. And then at the bottom, there's a small sort of analysis of how we intend to fund that investment. And members will be minded that we don't get a share of capital funding from Welsh Government or anybody else. This is financed through
our
borrowing,
yeah.
grants, small revenue contribution, and things like that. And that's why this budget is much smaller than the 80 million we've got in revenue. So, in summary, Appendix 1 presents the total budget of 12 million for the year, and set against this is the forecast outturn position, budget overspend and slippage at 10.5 and 1.9 million and 3.5 million respectively. Appendix 2, I don't want to alarm anybody with an overspend. Appendix 2 details grant funding that is available for some of these overspends that we'll go into detail about now. And the report provides a detailed narrative to support Appendix 1 and all the numbers therein. So if we move on to the individual budget headings and start with property, overall there's been a 4.5 million pound budget for the year. Forecast expenditure and budget slippage are 3.2 and 2.8 respectively. So there's a net overspend of 1.5 million, and it's driven by a number of schemes, the largest being the Urban Search and Rescue Facility at Whitchurch, which the work on that commenced last year, boiler replacement and the electrical vehicle infrastructure enlargement. So out of the 1.5 million pound and overspend, the key thing is 1.1 of that is funded through grants. A little bit more detail then on property, that's feeding into that above position, is Newin. Just this first report is just a scene setter for members, unless there's any significant changes at each point we come back with monitoring throughout the year. They won't, unless there's significant changes, we won't be updated you. So in terms of the scene, Newin is continuing. We're at design stage with our consultants. We're looking at making this our first carbon neutral fire station, potentially the first in Wales. There is premium to that, it's around 15% at the moment. Quite a bit of work yet to be done. And that work will start next year. So all the costs that you see there are survey searches and consultants' fees for design and whatnot.
We found the site then that's appropriate.
It's the current site.
It's the current site.
There is nothing else available. We've done a number of searches. The Sailor Mile Way fell through.
Right.
We haven't heard anything back from them.
I won't comment because it's in mine.
Yeah, no, it's all right. No, that's all right. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah,
thank you.
So Pontyclean is another of our projects. This can be split into two areas. The fire station was earmarked first. That's been pushed back somewhat. And we're using that initial £10,000 to demolish the fire training facility, which was originally part of the CFBT business case. So we've got CFBT now in Cardiff, £5 million, which we would do a real fire training, and we haven't used Pontyclun for a number of years. Given its size, we've got to apply for planning to knock it down. That site is quite a busy site. It's one of our co-located sites. Welsh Ambulance is on there with us. We've got occupational health there, so we need to free up that yard. Parking is at a premium there.
Can I ask on the Pontyclun site, and I knew I used to go there years ago, it's an old building, isn't it?
Very old.
It's not listed. Is it listed?
No.
Thank goodness for that then. That'll cause more problems.
It's not that old.
Might look it.
Sorry, Chris. Sorry, Chris.
It comes to mind, you're probably thinking of the old headquarters site at Lanley Hall. That
Is that in
probably
Prot-
more of it. Yes, it's in.
Oh, sorry. I was never very good on geography. I apologise, Lisa.
Yeah, we disposed of that site when we moved up there.
Oh, right, okay.
In our station, this will be a major refurb, so the planning work on that, design work will start in the new year, with construction next year and completion the year after. Members will be aware our capital schemes have much longer time horizons attached to them. Very difficult to start and finish a capital scheme in the year, so you'll see a lot of the same headings going on year. The on-call station project is a project set up to look at our storage, energy efficiency, and training facilities on our on-call sites. There's 9 sites there that we've put together a strategy for. We're using Pontyclun as a blueprint site, where we've got blueprint design, which we hope to use on all the rest if that works out. Planned and preventative maintenance. This has grown somewhat since we set the budget. We've got My Steg Roof, the tower strategy. I'm not sure, members, if you've had any detailed information since you all come in May about the tower strategy. There was an analysis of our tower stock undertaken across the building portfolio. 5 were in such a state of disrepair. We've got to demolish them, and we're going to replace them with the new stainless steel sort of structures. And I think with the Pontyclun site, that is going to be additional ones, so there's going to be 6 altogether, because that tower there is integral to the building. Our fuel pump at Cardiff Gate, that'll have a knock-on effect to our revenue budget and reduce fuel costs there for anybody fueling up in Cardiff Gate, because it's cheaper to fuel up to buy in bulk. To buy in bulk. And unfortunately, our fire alarm and headquarters is failing, and the parts are available, so that's an extra £50,000 there. So in planned preventative maintenance, there's a £38,000 overspend. Whitchurch will come to an end this month, I'm told. So the USAR facility there, quite exciting. That's been ongoing for over a year. And solar panelling, unfortunately, the 2 sites that we had earmarked, which was headquarters and Barry, majorly because they were south facing, we've not been able to progress with them. 2 different reasons. It's all related to the roofs, whether the roofs can withstand the weight of the structure. So we need to do a more detailed mechanical engineering analysis of our stock to see what we can progress. Unfortunately, we've had the yes on the funding, and we're unable to progress with that this financial year. I'd be very doubtful we'll be.
Can I ask you, is the roof strong enough to take it before we look at that? Because there's no point down there if the roof needs to be done.
That's
when you put the solar panels on.
Yeah, well, the mechanical engineers, they'll have a look at it. They were identified initially, and then of course, more detailed work is done after. So I think something like a good
false economy if you put them on and go take it back off.
Yeah, that was the issue with this site. We had a structural survey undertaken. The roof was compatible to take the actual units that we planned to put on. Unfortunately, when the contractors came in to view the site before, as part of the tender process then for doing it, their recommendation was that the roof would need, the actual materials on the roof would need renewing in a couple of years. So if you were to put solar panels on now, you'd have to bear the cost then of taking the solar panels back off to renew the roof.
Yeah.
So it's a case of the roof's structurally sound. It's just a case of timing now, whether we do a new roof before putting the panels on and do that in conjunction at the same time.
It's also the cost because of the price of, goods, it's an increased cost by dramatically in it. There we are. Here's a question from Martin, is it?
Yeah, it's on the same point, Chair. Thanks. So, noting that the roof in my stag is going to be replaced, does that incorporate a solar panel scheme as well?
No, not at this point.
Right, but it would, the condition on completion would be all set up to accommodate a solar panel, I take it.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at all our sites to see what's best to progress with in the short term, but quite a bit of detailed work needs to be undertaken before we can go with that.
Okay, thanks.
When you're ready.
I was going to ask you about my stag roof. I don't know if solar panels will work there because it only gets about 2 hours worth of daylight, doesn't it? Because of the valley. But it wasn't done that long ago, was it, my stag roof? Was it 10, 15 years? Because didn't they build over the old roof? They couldn't remove it.
That was before my time.
Yeah.
So I know the age of the station itself. It was refurbished probably around about 15 years ago. I think it's the actual the design of the roof that's caused the problems. It's being honest, I think through time, we've tried through various different reasons. Architects, I think, try to push the boundaries and try to design things that may look nice and aesthetic, but it doesn't necessarily suit the purpose of the fire station. So I think moving forward, we're certainly going back to more traditional style builds and roofs, which don't come with the natural problems that we've seen in some of those modern build sites that we've had.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, were they going to do one of the green roofs because it's more thermally efficient and that as well? And I don't. I was only asking a question. I'm not making a suggestion.
And we've got green roofs already. Not many.
Living wall window. Is that the one you're on?
Something like
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, the roof though, isn't it? That's the fashion now. Makes sense.
Yeah, I'll note that.
There's another question from Councillor
Sorry about that, Chair. Just to assure members, the sun is shining in my stag at the moment.
Switch the lights off.
Okay.
Councillor Albion? Rami?
Yeah,
Got a question?
yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just sort of, pleasantly surprised. We're spending money on chargers for electric vehicles when they become available, it says.
Yes.
So, I mean, how far is the future? When we might be using those charging points?
We're currently using charging points in headquarters and on our stations. The issue is not all of our stations have got the charging points. What they have is one twin charging facility. This 169,000 that we secured from Welsh Government will help ensure that all of our whole-time stations will have a charger on it, a twin charger on it, and also most of our on-call stations as well. So we have at the moment light vehicles, couriers use them that are using those chargers. But we just need delivery now of the electric vehicles to sort of benefit more. But the timelines and delivery of those is up to 70 weeks, the fleet manager discussed with us last week, wasn't it? 70 weeks on average delivery.
But that is referring, is it to fire engines or ordinary vehicles?
Ordinary vehicles.
Oh, ordinary vehicles, right.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's all the light fleet comes up.
Yeah, I see, yeah. It says when they become available, so wasn't sure when
Don't
will
think the
that
fire
be?
tenders have got to that stage yet.
No.
They're in development, they're doing them, but the cost is astronomical at the moment for the fire tender.
Yeah, so
Okay, thank you.
the replacement program is obviously for all the light fleet is based on replacing with, you know, current diesel ones with electric powered ones instead. But it's just, you know, as and when we can get delivery of those. So as soon as we can, you know, we will be replacing our entire light fleet with electric.
Got 30 live now. How many vehicles we got live?
Yes, for that.
30.
Yeah.
Okay, you all right with that? Yep, no,
Yeah.
fine.
So
Yeah, we got another one.
One question on new win, carbon neutral, absolutely awesome. Is that after it's completed and on what it's using, or does that include the build as well, with sourcing local building materials and?
as I understand it, when it's built, it should be carbon neutral.
Thank you.
A lot of change needs to occur to make that happen.
Yeah.
So it's not just the stuff that we put into it, you know, the grey water harvesting, things like that. I think there's quite a lot of change that's required from our users of stations then as well.
Thank you.
To make it greener.
Back to you again, Lisa.
Yeah, so moving on to the vehicle replacement programme, the overall budget for vehicle replacement was 5.4 for the year. Forecast expenditure 5.2 million and budget slippage is just shy of 700,000. So a net overspend of £500,000 is largely down to the increases for the cost of water ladders and rescue tenders. There's less significant overspends in other areas. The largest of these being the detection, identification and monitoring light vehicle at 65,000. So under the heading of truck, I think truck, water ladder, rescue tenders, we've had difficulty waiting for these vehicles.
To be honest with you, the costs have escalated absolutely tremendous.
And the costs have gone up.
Absolutely.
I think with the truck slide deck in particular, we've been waiting for that since 2018-19. It's a recovery vehicle. When we put the work out, we just got no takers in coming back tendering for the work, you know. And because of the delay, there's a £46,000 overspend.
What people need to realise is these are specialist builds.
Yeah.
You can't just pull them off the shelf.
Yeah.
You know, this is why there's such a long delay, because they are specialist builds.
If everything goes all right, it takes at least 26 weeks, so 6 months, if everything goes all right. So we know supply chains have been feeling the pinch since COVID, so that we're still living with the legacy of that. So in terms of water ladders, we've been behind the last 2 years. We're up to date this year, taken delivery of 8 water ladders in the summer. Members who were here for the member induction day would have seen one of the new water ladders, and we are taking 7 within the next couple of weeks, and that'll bring us right up to date with our rescue tender and water ladder delivery programme.
The only way is up then.
In terms of operational equipment, the overall budget for this area is 1.4 million. The forecast expenditure is 1.4 million, and there's a very small underspend of 38,000. The two things, RTC cutting equipment, they net each other off. RTC cutting equipment, and what was the other bit?
I'm glad they've gone for the mix of that, because I don't think the electric is fully there with some of the cutting equipment and everything. So
the original forecast and information we were getting back, we were going for fully battery operated equipment, and that's what's made the really big difference there.
I think it's a wise decision at the moment.
Yeah. ICT equipment, the overall budget is at 748,000. Forecast £20,000 overspend there, to do with some contractual issues and buying in from overseas. So the implications of current capital spending plans for the year and how this differs from the original budget is a forecast spend of 10.5 million. So that's what we forecast to spend and invest in capital this year. There's slippage into next year of 3.5 million. And there's a £1.9 million overspend. So how were we sort of dealing with a £1.9 million overspend? So we contributing 2.2 of 1.4 of grant funding and 258,000 of underspends are being redirected to support that. And there's a little table there on page 63 that just gives you an overview of how that overspend is being managed.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Lisa? She's done quite well then. Well, very well then, I won't say quite well. Is there any questions before we move on to the recommendations? No, I think we covered most of that.
Yeah.
The recommendations that members note the budget and progress of capital schemes, approve alterations identified in Appendix 1 and associated movements in funding. Is everyone happy and agreed on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. We move on to item 8 then, which is 2021 to 2022 Annual Treasury Management Review, page 69. I think that's you again, Lisa, isn't it?
Unfortunately,
You're a collector, you are,
So this annual Treasury Management Review, this is the third in 3 reports members will receive each year. So you'll initially get a strategy in advance of the financial year, and then you'll get a mid-year report which tells you we're progressing. That comes to you before December, and then you'll get a review report which looks back at last financial year. So this report looks at how we finished 2021, 22, whether we've reached any of our indicators, limits, you know, and what the picture looked like for us. Most of the information is contained within Appendix 1. That starts on page 73, and it starts off by talking about what our reporting requirements are. I've just outlined. I think we've already covered off the quirk in the timing of our meetings this year. Normally this report goes to FAPM before Fire Authority for scrutiny purposes. We did take it to scrutiny group due to timing this year. It's gone to Fire Authority already. Normally it works the other way, doesn't it? Yeah. So if I could draw members' attention to the table summary position on page 74, this sort of encapsulates most of our work in terms of Treasury. So Treasury is a bit different to revenue and capital budgeting. It looks at our banking, borrowing, investing and cash flow activities. So a bit strange there. Our Treasury activity is driven, one of the main drivers is our capital, because of course we don't get any funding, so that drives a lot of our borrowing need. So at the top of that summary position there, we've got our capital spending. For the previous year, 3.587, and for 21-22 we got 3.854. Now you can see in comparison to the estimate, we actually spent half of what we intended to spend. Last year was really difficult in terms of getting things in, taking delivery of items and whatnot. It was just, as we just discussed with the water ladders. So what does that capital spending do? It has an impact on something called the CFR, or capital financing requirement. So the more capital we spend on, the higher that capital financing requirement goes. And why that's useful to us is we look at how our actual borrowing tracks that CFR. So if you go over it consistently and sustained, that can mean there's trouble in the works there. You know, you're not managing cash flow, and you're not borrowing to support capital activities, which is the only reason we borrow. Yeah. So capital spending will increase CFR. Underneath the capital spending, it's got stuff like CERA, capital receipts, capital grant, revenue reserves. So those are the resources that we've put towards funding that capital expenditure. So you've got at the bottom there the borrowing requirement for the year. So for 2021 in the yellow column, our capital spending 3.854 million. We'd put resources towards it to reduce that to 3.8. And then underneath there, you've got this repayment of debt, MRP. Now, I touched on that when I was discussing the revenue monitoring report. What the MRP is, it's a charge that goes to revenue for the repayment of our borrowing. So you can see that 2.833 and the 365, they reduce in the borrowing requirement, and that brings us to a closing CFR of 41,541,000. So that's the figure we look in to track our borrowing against. Underneath, we've got our borrowing, start of the year, 29 million. We've repaid 916,000. We didn't undertake any new borrowing last year, and we finished with 28 million. We've got a PFI arrangement in Cardiff Gate, as you know, with Babcock. That, in effect, is debt. So that comes together with our actual loans. So our gross debt is 32,244,000. We are under borrowed by 9.2 million, which is a good place for us to be. The other area, it goes on to describe, there's some definitional items there describing what CFR is. The other area I'd like to draw members' attention to is table on page 77. So going along the theme of borrowing, when we've set out CFR capital budgets, we know what our CFR is. We operate within prudential borrowing rules.
Yeah.
We also set limits for borrowing, so there's an authorised and operational boundary limit there. You'll see operational boundaries 40 million, authorised limit is 45 million. Operational boundaries like a RAG system for us, you know, as soon as we start getting close to that, we monitor it every week anyway, but we keep a closer eye on it, and we cannot go over that 45 million. So that's a hard limit for us, and we didn't, because you can just see our debt was 32 million. So that's what you were monitoring us against. Maximum external borrowing is 29 million, and also then there's an indicator there in terms of financing as a proportion of our net revenue stream. We estimated that would be, so financing costs would be NRP, your interest, things like that, 6.71%. We came in a bit cheaper because we didn't undertake any additional borrowing of 5.9%. Following that table, there's a more detailed look at our borrowing activity for the year. So it looks at our PWLB borrowing, Public Works Loan Board, what we started the year with, what we paid and what we finished the year with, and the same as SAILX, which is our 0 interest % borrowing that we've undertaken to do green initiatives previously. So our LED lighting, EV chargers, things like that, isn't it? On the next page, so it's page 78, there's another table that just gives you a view of when our debts fall due, the time frame that they fall due. So what have we got to pay in the next year? 1.4 million. In the next one's 2 years, 3.8 million, and so on. What it makes sure is we don't put ourselves under pressure in terms of having to pay out too much altogether. We spread our repayments.
Yeah.
It also gives you what our average debt book rate is at 3.8%. That's a good average rate. It's cheap.
That was one of the questions I'm going to ask on to the next follow on. Then I'm going to be 3.83 again, is it?
3.8. Well, it alters. That average rate will alter every time we pay off our debt. You see, so we've got some loans maturing this year, so that figure will alter again. But if you notice, our newer loans are cheaper because we've taken them out more recently. So the most expensive loans are older.
My only concern is that there's a follow over the financial circumstances that loans may be more extortionate interest rates to buy.
I don't know if they'll be extortionate, because there was a time where interest rates were in double figures, when we're not there yet.
No.
At the moment it's 2.25. The current interest rate forecasts are it'll hit 4% Christmas time.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the indication is at the moment it'll peak at 5% at around Easter in the new year. But as Chris mentioned in the medium-term strategy, they are looking to come back down. They're going to peak and they're going to come back down. But at this moment in time, it doesn't look like as if bank rate's going to go higher than 5%.
Yeah. It's still an impact on it.
It still has an impact, because any borrowing you undertake now will have that extra
impact,
amount. So our strategy is to use our internal cash reserves and exhaust them before we undertake anything.
the thing to remember on that share as well is obviously if we borrow longer term, we pay the interest rate that is set on that long-term debt. So it's not like you have to take out a loan tomorrow and you have to take the interest rate tomorrow. You're taking a long-term market view of the interest rate when you take it out. So it's extremely unlikely that we'll see very high rates of interest coming back into the economy over that longer-term horizon.
Thanks for that.
Underneath that table with the maturity table, there's another table there. It says deposits were as follows. So that's the flip side of our borrowing or our debt position. That's our investment position. So that table shows members what the balances, cash balances in each of our banks were at the end of each month there. So you can see we had 17 million April 2021. And we dropped down to 7.2 million at the end of last financial year. And then what Cara's done for me, she's put a Bank of England rate there at the side of those balances, and you can see that that is increasing.
The only thing that flags up to myself is when you look at the interest received from April 21, there was nothing. And then there were some payout on December 21.
Well, you know, the thing is with interest rates, if you are a borrower, so largely low interest rates are great, but if you've got more money to invest, you want high interest rates. And because we are more managing our debt, we're more concerned with our debt, we're not making money. Cheap debt book is really what we're interested in. That 10,500 there was treated as a windfall for us. And will be used to offset overspends elsewhere.
It's worthwhile reminding members on the treasury management strategy as well around investments, of course. Yes, you could get higher interest rates than that, but the treasury management strategy is security first. We get our money back, liquidity, we get it back when we need it, and then return. So we're not gambling with the money, making sure we get it back.
No, thanks, Chris. It's called the SLAI model.
It's nice to have something back than nothing from that.
That's right.
So those are the highlights from the Treasury report. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions from anyone? I think you can have excellent. Because that's a really difficult one to try and get across, isn't it? Right, if there's no questions, then we'll move on to the recommendations. All right, that the Finance Audit and Performance Management Committee note the annual Treasury Management Review for 2021-2022 and approve the actual prudential and treasury indicators set therein. Is everybody happy with that?
Yes.
And online? Okay. Great, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for that. If we now move on to item 9, these are reports with information. The health check of priority actions and Q1 progress against the statutory performance indicators on page 81.
Chair, Wayne Thomas is attending the meeting today. He's going to present the first part of the report, and then he'll hand over to Andrew Gary Davis, who will present the second part of the report on the strategic indicators. Hand over to Wayne.
Okay, thank you all very much for having me. Like a lot of the reports today, this is the first quarter instalment of reports that are coming to this group today. My section that I'm going to cover today is going to give you a very brief overview, obviously, of the business plan and performance against the business planning section. As you can see, there's quite a number of pages that I'm going to cover. They're all qualitative and there's a lot of pages, so I'm not going to go into the exact detail, but I'll just give a little bit of assurance of what's in there. Obviously, I'm here to answer any questions if needs be. As you can see, the first part of the report is a qualitative overview of the first quarter's performance against 8 strategic themes. And within those themes, they're broken down further into 27 individual improvement objectives. Now, these are the objectives that in any given financial year, leading up to each year, we've discussed with the planning team as agreed them with the senior management team. These 27 objectives are then subject to the public consultation every year, around about obviously October to the end of December. and then they're ratified by the Fire Rescue Authority in preparation for the financial year. So what this report does in the first sort of 10 to 15 pages is it gives an overview of what the service is undertaking against all 27 of those actions, categorised quite nicely in 8 high-level strategic themes. Just for a bit of, obviously I'm not going to go into every single one, but a bit of assurance for the group today is the 27 improvement objectives are further broken down in-house to 156 individual tasks within our business plan. And every quarter, we've got an owner of those tasks giving an update, a quarterly update for senior management team about what they're doing to deliver that task. So the overview you see today is a little bit more of what we are doing to deliver on each objective. The reassurance is underneath that there's 156 tasks within the 27, but are specific sort of programs or projects that are ongoing, and each one of them has a management level of assurance where the owner will write a red, amber, green quality performance against it. Those that obviously aren't performing as well, or those that we do have red statuses, are subject to more focus from obviously the management team or those overseeing the project on a wider scale. Like I said, so what the performance team has done is looked at those 156 that are mapped to each of the 27 objectives and provided a bit of summary for members really of how we're going to deliver those improvement objectives. Like I said, there's a lot in there. I won't go into anything in particular, but again, if anybody wants to ask me any questions, I'll answer them as best I can. But the larger part of the report is obviously the numerical side of it in terms of performance against the national key performance indicators. And I think Area Manager Guy is going to carry on with this part.
Okay. Oh, you can.
Yeah. So I'm on page 106 now, where we can see the indicators and there's 7 key themes we look at them. And we report these back to Welsh Government also. You can see that we got 3 in amber, 3 in green and 1 in red. When we look, I'll cover the 1 in red first because I think, just to give you assurance where we are, we've seen an increase in special service calls we're attending, and this ranges from assisting ambulance to lockouts to lift rescues. The biggest increase has been to bariatric rescue. We've seen an increase across all services areas. It's one that we work hard to bring it to the figure we expected this year. But again, you can see with some of the issues out there with our ambulance colleagues and some of the difficulties they're having, we are tending to help them out quite a bit more. To give you reassurance, the help for them is normally life-threatening situations. So we are able to do something and quite often save a life. So I think it's, it looks bad when it's in red, but equally we're doing the right thing for the communities we serve out there. I think it's important that we put that in perspective as well. When we look at going through the figures, when we look at total fires attended, yes, it's increased for this quarter in comparison to last quarter. But again, we got to look at some of that as weather dependent with grass seasons, that type of thing. But still, it's quite alarming that the deliberate fires we attend for account to 76% of all fires. So, when we talk about schemes and works going on out there, there's still a lot to do in our communities to educate them to avoid this. Moving on to false alarms attended. There's an increase, 5% increase there. There's a lot of analysis going on with regards what we're attending there, but it's safe to say that the programs that we've got going on for education of the unwanted fire signals, that is still ongoing. And equally, I'll put in that a lot of the domestic properties we go to, which have triggered alarm system off, they need our assistance. So we carry out own fire safety checks at each one of these properties and try and make them safe in their own properties. And if there's any severe issues, then we will report them to local unitary authority, social care, etc., to make sure that they got the right services surrounding them. So although has been an increase, and you can put into that about aging alarm systems, and equally us requesting systems to be fitted in some of these properties for all business fire safety networks. We are doing a lot to try and reduce this, but and this is with the education programs as well. Pleasing to see that road traffic collisions attended have gone down. I know you'll all be aware of some of the trials of the 30 to 20 in some areas. We've seen a marked decrease in low speed impacts in these areas. So we'll look forward to perhaps seeing that going across a lot of the UAs. I know there is some resistance out there, but we're all about safety, protecting the public. If protecting the public is slowing down, let's put it in place. I've covered the special service calls. Deaths and injuries in fire. Yeah, we've seen a decrease. We want that figure at 0, to be honest, but I don't think we'll ever go there, but we'll always strive to do that and achieve that. So when we look at it, I know Lisa covered a bit about the amount of capital funding we use for equipment for home safety equipment. We know through the systems we got, every time we knock on a property, there's someone vulnerable that needs us to carry out this activity for a home safety check. So we end up putting more equipment in these properties, but it's all about making people safe. The last one on there then is dwelling fires confined to the room of origin. 144 of those have been confined to the room of origin, which I think is a good figure. So that tells me that possibly they got early warning equipment fitted in their property, so they're able to contact us sooner, so we can get to the property and limit the amount of damage in a property. So I think that working on that, we need that again to be all anytime we go to an accidental dwelling fire. They've listened to our education program, which is leave the property, shut the doors behind them, and call us out immediately. And these are the programs we're pushing out there now to try and limit the amount of injuries and the fire spread in properties. It also tells you that the fire cover we provide in the areas as well is satisfactory in protecting the public. So those are the key areas for me to chat about. I suppose, Chair, for open up to any questions.
Anybody got any questions? Yeah.
Going back to the bit about road accidents and that, do you find that this new 20 mile an hour limit is helping from that point of view? There was an incident down in Caldicott recently, and this lady, she sent it in on, I don't know, it was on something on the phone, and she got, she was cross about it, she didn't like it, but anyway, she was keeping to the 20 mile an hour, and a young man on a bicycle in front of her fell off his bike in front of the car, and she said if she had been going more than 20, she'd have hit him, and she said it made me think. So I know a lot of people don't like it, they say, oh, but in the end, you'll find that people travel. The travelling keeps moving. It's like what they did on the M25. If you're going at slower speed and you're all doing that, you get there just as soon.
Yeah.
But yeah. I don't know how you fight. Has it made any difference yet?
When we look at what we carry out with our education, it's always been about slow down. I think we're in a society where people are rushing. And we see the school run in the morning, we see a marked increase of low speed impacts there, and at the end of the day we know we can stop quicker if we travel in a 20 than 30. So for me it's a good thing. I think we've got a massive education program going on out there now to educate the public why, because they only see it as the bare facts of I got to travel 20 now rather than 30. But when you see the stats across impacts at that speed, there are less injuries. And we talk about what we're trying to do actively, getting people out walking, cycling, that type of thing. A perfect example, Councillor Powell, that cyclist would possibly would have been severely injured if the car was around a 30. You know, one of the impacts for us that we got to be aware of is obviously with our on-call firefighters, it's going to take them that step longer to turn up to the fire station. It's something we're analysing now to look at it, and we may have to increase turnout times for
Yeah,
them.
no, this was brought up in a meeting we had online the other night with council about the fire station, because of course it's 20 mile an hour on the Hereford Road in Abergavenny where the fire station is, and whether they could have some sort of leeway that because otherwise you're going to have to know your area that you can get somebody that's able to come to the fire station in the right time, and whether that could be something done to override that.
Yeah, and I'm looking at that now, so there's flexibility and looking at each specific area in particular. You know, when you describe the perfect area, that's right outside the fire station, we've got the 20 miles per hour.
Yeah.
You know, we want our firefighters to arrive safely and to be able to take their fire engine to the incident. So, you know, it's having that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have people within a certain mileage of the fire station, so they can get there in a certain time.
Yeah.
That's going to narrow that circle down now, isn't it?
We've run a trial in us of increasing it to 7 minutes turnout.
Yeah.
And that's,
So you aren't going to lose them, it's just...
Yeah. We'll increase the times rather than lose people, because
I'm glad about that, because that was something that came up in at least that meeting, I can tell them that, because they, you know, that this was their concern.
On that same note, Guy, especially with the containing fires to the room of origin, will they be altering that? Because I think the policy at the moment for when you're driving on blues is 1.5 times the speed limit, which means that our vehicles will be doing 35 mile an hour instead of 40. So not only is it taking us longer to get people in, we've got to drive slower on the way to the incident.
The driving instruction has changed,
Right.
And I don't know if you're aware, we've increased the appliance driving course from 1 week to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we're trialing that at the moment for different, you know, and educating people where they can drive fast, what they can use, and you know, ensure they get to the incident safely, but using the roads properly.
Yeah.
And we know there's areas where, and you know, driving appliances and vehicles to them, we can go that a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
Just making sure that risk assessment is continuously being done, and teaching people how to drive in convoy properly, teaching people how to drive in dark. So it has changed. So whereas we were quite specific with this is the speed limit you can go to, there is a bit of flexibility in that now as well.
Yeah.
But you know, when people are driving at 20 and a fire engine comes up, they can pull over far safer to get out of the way.
Like pray,
you know,
Well, most do.
Yeah,
they
don't know.
Yes.
No, not always, but you know, for me, it's a good thing. Let's make people safer, and they're in the right areas.
Okay.
Speaking from personal experience, I had a shock a few weeks ago. I didn't listen to the commanders when they said about my smoke alarm fell off the ceiling. Because a long story short, I kept putting it off and putting it off. But anyway, watching the Queen's funeral, my notebook was, I was working in the lounge. My notebook was on the table, it's got a plastic cover. The sun was shining very strong that day. Next thing I noticed was smoke coming up from my notebook. So obviously, I spat on it for want of a better, because it frightened me. So the following morning, I went up to the station, had another row of the commander there, and he said, by the end of the day, we'll be over to put your alarm in. I'm always, you know, telling other people, you must have a smoke alarm, particularly pensioners. And I should practice what I preach. And it did frighten me when he explained to me that I was seconds away from it combusting. So I'm more careful now, and when I speak to people, I can use myself as an example.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you
What
sharing.
not to do.
Yeah, and I think is we've got to lead by example, and we.
Yes, I agree.
Our establishment is, you know, it's not just the firefighters understand this. All personnel who work in headquarters or for the fire service, and we're one big team. So, you know, and
the lesson I can say.
There's only got to be a bit of glass in the sun to start
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to thank
Thank you.
the professional of the team because they put out the fire in Pontypool yesterday and a quick response. So I'd like to thank them for that anyway.
I appreciate that.
I got two questions regarding with the SSCs. If they one area is particularly rising, do we target that now as a follow-on to try and reduce that increase?
Yeah.
And I'll give you the other one because this is the nice one.
Right.
Time of year. Bonfire night is near approachment. What are we doing to interlock with some of these teams and the housing associations? Because particularly the area I represent is a bit of a, I won't say hotspot because that's not the right word, but a bit of a nightmare for bonfires.
Yeah, so I go on the first question first with the special service calls. Yeah, we you know, in particular water rescue, that type of thing. We've got a targeted approach to educate the communities. The balance comes with this is with a healthy lifestyle. Not more people are entering the water now to do different sports. So we've got to come on board with them and you know, ensure they're using risk assessed areas and you know, got the proper equipment to do these sports. You know, paddleboarding is one of the ones that's seen a massive increase.
Yes.
So it is working with them. We're working with our Welsh Ambulance colleagues as well. You know, I will say it, I think they got a lot to learn from our preventative agendas, you know, our successes. So we're talking about them. And when we go into properties now and we see risks, which are not just fire, we will remove those as well or discuss them or educate. So it's not just about fire risk now. We've lift rescues as well. We've entered into agreement with lots of the companies so that to really pass the onus back to them to get lift engineers turned out quicker. And there's lift engineers on call permanently now in Cardiff and Newport. So we have seen a slight decrease in that. But still, if someone has a medical episode when they're in a lift, we'll be there and we'll immediately turn out. Lockouts of properties, yeah, you know, it's working with our police colleagues then to make sure they are fully aware of what we can and can't do.
Yeah.
And we don't want to become an agency that they're the first to turn to, where it's just basically sort the lockout. But, you know, again, if there is a fire risk or someone is in a property, hasn't been seen for several days, we've all got to work as a partnership to make sure that person's safe. So there's lots going on. But in all honesty, I think we'll see an increase in special service calls with the way we are.
I think so. A lot of people more at home and they tended to work from home.
Yeah. Bonfire night then as well. It's a bit of a perfect storm this year, to be honest. We've never had the half term leading up to bonfire night before, and we've traditionally seen difficulties, rise in antisocial behaviour and all that in that week from Halloween to bonfire night. So there's loads of work going on. It's part of the risk assessment CRMPs of every station, the 47 stations. I look at Operation Bang, which is where we work with police colleagues leading up to bonfire night. Our message is still go to an organised display, but you know, you will see people lighting bonfires. Rather than working against them, we're trying to work with them. So if we see them building bonfires now, it's about that risk assessment, the safety of it, you know, and looking after the environment. We don't want to put in loads of tyres on it, that type of thing. But it's about that responsible person working with them and ensure that they understand what their duties are. And then in that risk assessment, where is it positioned? Is it close to properties? That type of thing. So there's loads of work going on. Several of our stations have got organised displays, so we're encouraging people to go to those. But I am worried about this period of half term.
I know with the previous work you've done before with the housing associations and collaborate, they were quite successful. So I didn't know whether you were sort of leading on that again, particularly some of the most vulnerable areas where there seems to be a lot of issues with bonfires.
Yeah, and that work's ongoing. And fair play, you know, in a way of not causing upset to the communities as well. They've helped with removal of stuff if we need it. So if there's any dangerous substances, we'll get it removed and taken to a place of safety rather than it's set fire to. but you know as well, I know some people take bonfire night as an opportunity to burn what they can, stuff that they can't be bothered to take to the local landfill sites. So you know, it's
Well, what I have seen previously is the RSLs have come in and sent vans in and cleared the whole bonfires.
Yeah.
You know, to take that away, and then there's been a lot of animosity with the residents. And nobody's spoken to them, you know, what the issue was. But,
and you know, we've learned lessons over the years. We've removed bonfires, and then you get lots of smaller ones all around the areas. Then, so is it easier to work with the communities and say, build this bonfire, let's help you build it safely? You know, I don't know what the night is about.
I think just more of a collaboration and communicating with them. You know, on the previous ones, I've seen it quite successful. It worked. A bit heavy-handed with the housing associations, but for us, no. But I mean, for them, yeah.
The bonfire night itself is normally a quiet night for us. It's the lead up to it. And again, that's what I'm worried about. Is ban is operated over the half-term period.
My beef is about the fireworks. You know, because they'll start setting them up. Well, they started this weekend.
Yeah.
Once they get hold of the fireworks, they'll start now and finish next year sometime.
And
the accidents from that.
They
are too easy.
Any other questions for Gary? You're gonna
Thank you
job
very
at answer.
much.
And all the local your own boroughs,
Yeah.
once they're released now, we can but go to all the members.
Yeah, the obviously within the report, you've got the 10 unitary authority overarching reports. For each member will get a more detailed report for the local.
And then if you want to share that with your colleagues, and you know,
that with them.
which is I think is really beneficial. I send it out to all my colleagues, and they do thank me, you know, and the fire service for it. So are we all happy to note that one?
Yes.
That's excellent. And then we move on to item 10 then, which is the Audit Wales final audit letter. And I think that's Chris, isn't it?
Any one of us.
He was a bit out of it then.
Yeah, well, apologies, Chair, on behalf of Gillian. She couldn't attend the meeting this morning, but then again, I don't think there was a lot yet to say. This is just final confirmation that they've finished their work, notifying you that the audit is done and dusted. And that's all I'm going to say.
Short and sweet, Chris. Anybody else want to come in on any of that?
No.
So that's for the information, so everybody's happy to note that.
Yeah.
Right, and then we move on to item 11, which is the forward work programme. And that's on page 125. That's Galen, isn't it?
Yeah, just the standard work programme set out for the remainder of the municipal year. Slight change of today's meeting. We would normally have internal audit reports on the agenda, but it's just a timing issue. Internal audit reports being finalised ahead of the publication time. So we'll probably see in the December meeting now there'll probably be a catch-up, so there'll be more internal audit reports coming through. I don't, Steen's online. I don't know, Steen, if you want to make any comment on that.
Online,
just to agree with Garrett, yeah, thanks, Garrett. Yeah, so we've got a few audits in train at the moment, so we're hoping to get those in draft to the service in the next few weeks. So once finalised, then they will come to the December meeting.
Okay, thank you for that, Steve.
So the rest of the programme set out, you know, as standards, unless members want any additional reports or items added to the plan for the remainder of the year.
I think it's pretty straightforward on the approach, isn't it? Everybody happy with that?
Yes,
On to the last one, which is consider any business that the chairman deems urgent. I haven't got anything, but the vice chair wants to read something.
I'm sorry, I should have asked the chairman at the beginning. I attended Abertillery Fire Station last week and the commander shared his audit report with me. And I'm pleased to note that it's very good. I'm just pleased to announce it here. Nice to see a lot of green boxes ticked. There is one red one, there's not mainly green. So I'm very pleased and proud for them. Thank you.
And that's it then. That's the end of the meeting, and thank everybody for their time this morning.